Hey, welcome to the house.
Welcome to the party,
You're listening to season 2 of the House Party Podcast.
the campaign season.
We're your hosts. I'm Kyle Ishmael.
And I'm Malik Wright. And on today's episode, advocacy and policy strategist Nayella Amaru crashes the party.
Tulsi's out the house.
Mayor Pete's on the come up.
Councilman Andy King's going down.
And I go all the way off on the treatment of staffers.
All right, let's get this party going.
Let's get it going, y'all.
All right, folks. So today we are joined by a very dear friend and a great colleague in the government and politics space. We're joined by Nayella Amaru, also my fellow. We got some.
Hi.
Hey.
We got some common Georgia connections. I went to high school in Atlanta, and Nayella definitely left her mark on the Peach State.
And I've been in a dark room at Bulldogs in Midtown. So we've all been there. We're all connected.
We all got our Atlanta
We are all connected. Shout out to Peachtree.
Shout out to Peachtree.
All of them.
Shout out to Fitz. All the Peachtree.
All 5,241
Right, exactly.
Street.
Yeah, thank you. Shout out to Waffle House. Shout out to Varsity.
All right.
Make Club 112 rest in peace.
Right?
Do my part. But I mean, Nayella is just overall a badass bitch. I have been approved to be able to say that.
When you say it, you've been approved. It makes it even worse of approval.
Yeah.
Well, look, I ain't trying to be out here like Cuomo, just dropping derogatory words left and right. I'm gonna read a little bit of Nayella's bio just so y'all know who the hell she is and why she is on this illustrious show. So Nayella is an advocacy and policy strategist with more than 15 years experience spearheading visible and highly demanding positions in both the nonprofit and government arenas, with a particular expertise in community engagement, issue campaigns, government relations, coalition building at the local, state, and national levels. She's previously served as policy advisor to former Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed, legislative aide to U.S. Congressman John Lewis,
Shout
the
out.
Honorable.
The Honorable.
And she also served as executive director of the New York City Council's Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus.
So your counterpart.
She was the me
Yes.
in New York City.
about you.
She is a distinguished Army veteran and ammunition specialist who has served in Iraq and, among other military accomplishments, was awarded an Army Commendation Medal for exemplary service. Was that given to you by Tulsi Gabbard? Did she present that?
Are we going to go there?
Not yet.
Eventually.
Right now?
Let's
Because
save
we
that.
could go there.
Let's
We could
save
go
that.
there. I don't know if y'all ready, but I'm ready.
We can save that.
We'll save that. Yeah. So Nayella consults with community-based organizations on issue-based and legislative campaigns and with nonprofits to help maximize their social impact by providing expertise in strategic planning, program evaluation, operations analysis. She does all the things, y'all. And she achieved her master's in public administration, policy analyst from the University of Texas at San Diego. All right. A master of public policy, nonprofit management from Georgia State University. Okay. And a master's in urban affairs,
All
urban
the
planning
masters.
from Hunter College in New York City. I remember when you were doing that.
That's right.
Doing the most.
All the degrees.
Right.
All the
the
degrees
letters.
paid with your tax dollars.
Right,
Shout out to
yes,
Uncle Sam and the GI Bill.
Shout out to Uncle
Thank
Sam.
you to all the listeners who
You're
paid their
welcome.
taxes.
And I can't wait to Good Liz starts taxing them more so that I too can think.
Got all these degrees. She even took my degree. All right, so she earned her BA in political science and a BS in criminal justice from the University of Texas at San Antonio. And that is Nayella.
Anything else you
In a
want
nutshell.
to tell us about?
I'm just
Tell us.
excited to be here. I've always, been a really big supporter of y'all's work, and I'm excited that you have opened the door for a little bit of Southern comfort to come
And you're our first guest of the season.
First guest of season 2. Welcome.
And we plan on having all the presidential candidates on, so you're the first.
I take it very seriously. I take this responsibility very, very seriously. I'm excited for this conversation just to, shoot the shit like we always do. Only this time, I can't cuss as much because my mama might listen.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
don't want to
my
shame
mother-
About
her.
time that she learns.
My mother,
Right?
No, she knows who she raised.
my mother does. I hope my mother listens. She liked it. She liked the last episode. But I don't know. Sometimes I think she's just saying that she listens.
Right.
I know your mother listens.
Yeah, my mom listens.
Sorry, Mom.
Sweet stuff. She likes it. Shout out to the moms.
Yeah, shout out
Yeah.
to Mama. Hey, Mama.
So today we're going to be walking back about the most interesting stories of this week, and one of the stories that kind of hit like a bombshell.
Yeah. And it's still just like
and still sort of bubbling up
flaming and right.
is the Andy King report. So the City Council Standard and Ethics Committee came out with a whole report,
ass
48
report.
pages, long ass report, even though they do like an executive summary, so you could stop there. But they came up with a whole report laying out basically over the years, over the just the shit, and it's only actually around the investigation. So
Because Andy King he's a city council member from the Bronx. This is his third term. He's one of those third termers.
He's one of the third
right?
termers, so he'll finish out with 12 years if he makes it through. But essentially, the report lays out a long, meandering tale of retaliation, of harassment, of misconduct, of fraud, of his wife using
power,
his wife was a very powerful union leader. So long story short, he is basically did all the things. And what made it worse is that as they were investigating, he was firing. He wasn't cooperating with it. He was firing employees.
Threatening them. Not cooperate.
He was having meetings at his house, basically like with a fucking like light over them, being like, who did you talk to? You talked to the fucking investigator? So this was basically... the council has decided that they are going to vote as to whether or not to sanction him. The sanctions include a $15,000 fine. It includes a suspension for like a month.
Right.
It includes a monitor in his office to watch to make sure he's not making
basically like all the personnel decisions that he's making. Have
to make sure his wife's not working out of the office, to make sure that he's not forcing employees to drive him around and all this stuff. And it's quote unquote the most aggressive the council has ever voted on for a member. But I don't think it's the most aggressive you could actually be for the shit that was laid out.
Yeah. Right. I think it's a bunch of bullshit. Sorry, Mom. Because I feel like, particularly for a member who has such a long, very well-known record of doing unethical and illegal things.
Yeah, this isn't his first run-in.
This is not his first run-in. This is since he has essentially taken office. It has been one incident after the other. And members and, city council leadership, since he's been on board, has known about his behavior but has done nothing, right? And I think that it's an unfortunate precedent that when there have been multiple sexual harassment allegations, and in 2017, his punishment that his colleagues have found, he said these things, he did these things. His punishment offered by his colleagues was you sit in a 60-minute sexual harassment training for...
You be on your phone the whole time, by the way.
Exactly. And it's just like, this is, again, number one, #MeToo is the influence is, again, it shows up to some degree in politics, but really how much does it show up when you're not holding elected officials who have been proven guilty of engaging in these behaviors accountable for their actions. And when you do, it's with the 60-minute training. And then with a 48-page report, again, not telling us anything that we don't know. Again, because this is behavior that he has consistently engaged in that people have known about. This is what he does. And his punishment for a sitting council member who makes over $150,000 a year is to give up some lunch money by paying a $15,000 fine and to be sent home to think about what he did for 30 days.
Is it unpaid? Do we know?
It's unpaid. It's unpaid, but when you're making $150,000 a year...
It's like a little vacation. It's like leave without pay.
That is absolutely nothing.
Especially if you went to the Virgin Islands and had a whole ass wedding on the council's budget.
Exactly. And you're using taxpayers for personal gain. Again, this is what has been known, right? This is not anything that's shocking, which is what blows my mind, because as a former council staffer, I mean, these are things that the things that we know and hear about how people move in these spaces.
You hear about
this is not a surprise.
Real talk. You hear about the members who are fucking staffers, and who everybody knows about it, but we're just going to ignore it or just giggle under. Like, we just talk about it behind closed doors. You know about the people who are treated this way. You could see it, right? You've seen the staffers who are like nervous to fucking breathe around their members.
I will say that this is, I think we're seeing in this, with Corey Johnson being speaker, we are seeing more of an interest in holding the members accountable, right? He's stripped people of committees. We joke on here about who's next to be stripped.
Who's stripped next?
Right. So I think that you got to give props where props are due. To your point, right? Is this going to be a slap on the wrist? Is it going to go further? Right. Like, people have called
Right.
for his expulsion. Right. You got the mayor calling for his expulsion. Scott Stringer.
Resignation.
Other
expulsion, I guess.
Either one. They just want him gone.
But they aren't voting on
Other
that.
council
They aren't voting on
members.
that. So
Right.
they could have voted on that.
Right. And that's
Right.
the thing too. So it's like it's good to definitely see that people are being held accountable to some degree, but like it has to match, right? Like the punishment has to match the deed.
Right. I definitely
and is
agree.
that
I
the
definitely
case?
agree with that. But I also think the other component is timing, right? So again, because this behavior has been consistent since he's been in office, and no one has ever done or anything or said anything to hold him accountable. But now 2021 is around the corner, and people are trying to position themselves for that
For their
next
next thing.
for their next step. So the behavior has not changed, but what has changed has been the timetable that you are trying to
Now
use
you
this
deem
behavior to benefit
relevant.
yourself, so that you can get out a press release and say, "Look, I held
holding
someone
my
accountable."
colleagues
When you had 6, 7, 8 years
all
to
these
hold him
years,
accountable.
He's a third termer. He's not brand fucking new.
Yeah.
He's been
And
there
the people
long.
holding him accountable aren't brand fucking
He's been there
good.
long
Like,
enough for my old ass to have worked on his first campaign that he lost. Like
Right.
that's how long he's been around.
Right.
So he's not brand new. None of this is brand new. They're afraid. I've talked to constituents. I still have family and friends who live in the district, and like. It's a big conversation around the fact that they also feel as though they're not getting the services they need, and that they feel they can. The thing is that constituents sense it. They sense that like this is some like king and queen who are basically doing whatever the fuck
doing
they
whatever
want.
they want,
They know
yeah.
this. All right, and mind you, again, like this is my home district. It makes no fucking sense to me that you would sit there and like treat your staff like this, treat people like this in general.
Right.
Just do whatever you want. But then again, and I'll talk about this a little later. It's sort of how the council works, sort of how all legislative bodies
Yeah.
work. It's set up because, honestly, the leaders of the bodies, they become leaders by being voted on by these members. And so there's an incentive to say, all right, let me let these members, you are the king of your castle. You are the boss of the world that you have. And I won't, so we can all be on a good space, I'm going to let you do what you have to do. Central staff at these places are they're unionized, they're being watched over, they have to follow rules, there's sexual harassment training, there's you could be fired for doing
Right,
the things
right.
that these members are allowed to do. But for some reason, we just say, oh, do whatever you want. Spend your money however you want, right? You could pay staff however you want. You could pay your chief of staff $200,000 and then
Right,
use an
and then
extra
just
$100,000
Yep.
to split it up between the rest of your staff.
I think that speaks also to the frustration of why people, particularly in the last few election cycles, are so frustrated with the political system, because to the point that you just raised is even a clown like him, there's always a deal to be cut in politics,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a reason why he has not been held accountable.
Right,
You
right.
know, whether that's because of who his wife is, or because, you know, even though he does engage in all this egregious, unethical, and illegal behavior, he's still a vote, right?
Right.
And so everyone
You're trying to get
has a
bill
deal.
passed, if you're
Exactly.
supporting it, then they're
Exactly.
willing to-
Everyone politics is about power.
Yep.
About
Right.
taking it away or about trying to preserve it. And once you get to the city council, everyone's a progressive until they're in power, right? Because everyone
And I
and everyone again has their reasonings for cutting the deals that they do.
Right.
But I think it just feeds into that frustration of, again, a sitting council member, sitting elected official who is neglecting his constituents because for whatever reason he's getting caught up in one scandal after the next and is not being held accountable. I think it speaks to, again, the frustration of why we don't have a better political pipeline here in the state of New York. Why do we not have better candidates? Because there are candidates out there
Yeah.
that have the character and integrity and
It's
work
New York
ethic
City,
to be able
like,
to provide
millions of people
services
here, millions of talented people
without
here,
sexually
yeah.
harassing and firing
Right.
your
Yeah,
without
staffers.
abusing people, like without having to add that extra dynamic. Like,
right.
let me put a little extra on top of it. Just do your fucking
do your
job.
job.
Just go to work.
Yes.
Pass bills. Make sure your constituents are answered to. You don't gotta punish people.
But he did it because no one ever held him accountable. Like this behavior was not new.
Yeah.
He has a record of retaliation of staffers. He was just doing what the council allowed him to do.
Right.
I just think to myself, like, the pain that like these staffers must be feeling. I mean, in the coming days, there's been there's been calls for his resignation, right? So what we already said, like Scott Stringer,
Right.
Corey Johnson, Jimmy Van Bramer, the mayor,
Blasio.
all these people, not the public advocate. But with that said, there's definitely been like a move to say he needs to resign. And frankly, you know, it's so funny because we talked about this in the terms of race. We talked about it earlier. We talked about it last week. We talked about it before that we started letting more things go. We let blackface go. We let, saying the N-word go. So now it's sort of like,
and everything.
Anything goes. There used to be a time that this shit happened, you had to resign. But now there's this whole thing, like I could treat people however I want because guess what? It's just ledge staff. Like it's just they work for me. They need to stop complaining. They're supposed to be loyal to me as the member, and therefore, I can do whatever, say whatever, treat them however, because you know what? If they're lucky, because like you talked about the pipeline, if they're lucky, then I'll endorse them when they want to have my seat when I'm done. And so, you talked about the pipeline. The fact is that the majority of the legislators, at least in the city council, but I'm sure in the state level, probably not as heavily as because there's no term limits.
Yep, former staffers.
But city council, former staffers, chief of staff, deputy chiefs. These are people, ledge directors. These are people who work for them. So there is an incentive to just sit there and take that shit. There's an incentive to be like, all right, I'm gonna shut the fuck up, and whatever I have to do, I'll do it because this is me having to do what I gotta do.
I was gonna say, I also think that also falls into this false narrative that the elected official is the one with the power. And through a legal perspective, I guess if you're a staffer, yes, but also I think it feeds into a really unhealthy ego for a lot of elected officials because I've been a former staffer and I've been very lucky because I've worked at the council. I've worked at the council, but I've also had the honor of working for someone as amazing as Congressman John Lewis. And it's so interesting to see how people handle power, right? Because I think that power reflects your character. I'm going to go ahead and pass the collection plate from Malik over there. I'm over here. Well,
I'm going to have to pass that I'm going to pass that over. I don't got the funds right now.
Today, Lord.
I can't tithe right now.
Visit us on patreon.com/houseparty.
Wow.
Cut a check. Cut a check. Support this podcast because we spit in truth. But in all seriousness, it is an unfortunate reality because how sad and how heartbreaking is it that an adult who tolerates such inhumane behavior feels that they do not have the power to say something about it. And if they do have the courage to say something about it, then they are punished and nothing happens to the member who is engaging in the behavior.
Sensitivity training. Yeah.
And again, it feeds into the I am the elected and I can do whatever I want. And it's almost like this expectation that if you are a personnel in an elected official's office, that it's a rite of passage to be treated horribly. And that's for me, I think that's the wrong. That's the wrong message. Like the elected official, yes, has power through a very limited scope in the sense of, they are your principal and you are there to work and advance their agenda. But that does not mean to the degradation of our humanity.
Right.
And I think that's where the message is lost.
Person, as a human being. Right. Absolutely.
There are a lot of them who are just normal people or they're not always. Actually, there's nobody.
A lot of people, most people have
quirks.
Yeah. They
quirks.
got something.
But you know the ones who like just do their work, keep their head down, you know the ones. But then you have the ones who are just like you said, the way they process power has created the idea that it's like some of them created in a way where they're the king. Some are created where they're the son in a family, and they're the boy king who's supposed to be treated and coddled and please make sure my food is here. I'm not getting paid nearly enough to worry about if you ate or not.
To think about bills and legislation.
Yeah,
my job.
It was a day that there was a day that stated in Margaret Chin's office brought in Asian food, Chinese food as like a celebration for Chinese New Year's. And mind you, we had legislation coming, land use deal. That's all I was worried about. And then all of a sudden I got red for not making a plate. It was like, oh, you didn't make me a plate? I'm like, I didn't even know you were hungry. How the fuck am I supposed to make you a plate? And so it's sort of like these are the things that and I'm not unique. I see it all around, right? Nobody's unique. You see it all around. And in the worst case scenario, especially for women staffers, frankly, they bear a big brunt of it because on top of having to make a plate, you also have to deal with being touched and hugged and what are you wearing and all this stuff. You got to deal with all of the extra stuff. And I just, you have to deal with, there's members who I've heard of who've scheduled staffers, women staffers, to make sure that they don't go on dates because they don't want them to be out with be around men, right? Like things that are so self-controlling, and it's insane to me. It's literally insane to me.
I wish y'all could see my face because
Yeah, I'm like, we got to like
that is extra.
yeah.
That is not even
It's
extra.
really
I
extra.
think that's a clear violation of staffers practicing their own personal lives and autonomy and being able to make their own decisions. The thought process is elected officials are the ones who are all powerful
Right.
and they are the puppet masters,
Like, you're
which
one
is a
of
very
several.
skewed sense of reality.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of staffers, fall into the belief that that narrative is true, and it costs staffers. And it also costs the general public because it perpetuates things like this to happen, and nothing is done about it.
And the whole argument is that you don't want to undermine the will of the voters, right? You don't want the council to make a decision that says, all right,
Because ultimately,
the voters knew
your voters elected you, so
three
how
times
much can I really say or do?
He was reelected with people knowing what he had done before, right? And so the argument is that, all right, well, the voters knew, but that we got to come up with a better standard than that, especially when we're thinking about the fact that these people manage employees, many of them young, many of them
impressionable.
impressionable, and it has an impact. It has a long-term impact because, as you said, the pipeline. If the majority are staffers, and if you've gone through this
They're treated
system,
like that. Hurt people, hurt people.
Hurt people, hurt
That's
people.
right. That's
Right.
right. It's
You're
real.
more likely to go and do it yourself to other people. When you become a member, you think to yourself, all right, well, this is how I used to do it.
how-
So and so,
right, yeah.
Right.
so and so, you should have seen when I was like when I was under so and so. No,
Right.
break
stop
the
it.
cycle.
Break the cycle.
Break
The
the
cycle.
cycle. So, woo, let's take a little moment,
That's a lot.
a little air break.
Woosah.
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 And now on to Pete Buttigieg.
We're gonna light into the next
Some therapy
problematic.
session here.
Personal connections here.
It's
but,
real.
It's real. It's hard. Though this is some, our listeners. We pride ourselves on being, listened to by staffers, like by people who are in the invisible faces
That's
that are
right.
behind the
Yeah,
curtain.
But the
people
ones
are
who
getting
really
this
run
shit done.
government at all
government,
levels.
yeah.
Shout out to the staffers.
Shout out to the staffers.
Shout out to the staffers.
We're
Party
the-
crashers.
Party
talk.
Crashers. We're a staffers
We're here for
podcast. Y'all listen and y'all are a part of it and you get what we're talking about. And shout out to y'all. Keep your heads up. If you're out here listening. If you're lucky enough, that you don't have to deal with any of this. Also
Good for you.
keep that stay with your head up. How about that? So this week, Pete Buttigieg has been doing pretty well. P-Bud, as we call him.
affectionately call him here on the show. P-Bud has been in the top 5, right?
He
top
said
5,
he has
top
no issue
6.
earning money.
He's raising hands over fists, tons of fucking money. Because
the gays got
all
cash.
the gays, all those P-Town fundraisers,
Providence
and
Town,
Fire Island fundraisers,
Fire Island,
and New
shoot.
York City.
We need to have a house party
fundraisers.
fundraiser on Fire Island.
Yes.
Kyle, can you please organize that? I know you got
What do
connects.
I have?
I think you know the Brambles. Kyle's like, cut that out. But yeah.
No. So he's raising tons of money. I mean, in the third quarter, right? Like the top earner was Bernie Sanders at 25 million, Elizabeth Warren at 24.6, and then P-Bud is right up there with 19
The police are
million,
really
right?
wily.
So he's raising money.
I feel like with Mayor Pete, he is yet another example of white privilege. And
Tell us about it.
So my thoughts are
I wish I had white privilege.
essentially,
I want to feel what
it
I feel
must
like for
be
like.
nice,
I want to feel
right?
like I feel like for just like a week.
Nice to like Mario Brothers. You just like eat a mushroom and you're like do 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 do.
And then like all of a sudden it's like white privilege.
White
Like,
privilege. yes.
for any of our listeners who have white privilege, can you share
Please,
some of it
share
please
some
with
with
us?
us.
Thank
Share
you.
some. And you can share some
On
of it by
Patreon.com.
cutting a check to houseparty.com.
At patreon.com/houseparty.
There you go. So I look at his candidacy, his campaign for presidency through a few different lenses. One, as a millennial and also as a combat veteran, I love to see people our age throwing their hat in the ring, really stepping up to serve and
Also,
lead
you're
in new ways.
You're a Tulsi supporter. That's what you're saying.
So we will get to that, but the short answer is
You
no.
really want to bring Tulsi into
Don't
this
you
conversation?
test me. Don't you test me right now.
I feel like Kyle works for Tulsi.
I know.
He's a
Are you a
cipher.
Russian asset?
He's a cipher. He's a Russian asset working on the Warren campaign on behalf.
Okay, Hillary.
On behalf of the undoubted beast.
personification of
My
the
name.
rocks.
You are the personification of the rocks.
Of the
Yeah,
rocks.
you are the queen of Russians, of the Russian warmongers. But yeah,
So all that is true.
yeah, hit dog or holler.
But back to Pete. Again, with those two identities, I want more younger folks running
Yeah.
for office, and I want more veterans to serve in a different way. But with Pete, who has governed 3 people,
And the dog.
all 3 people
He
and the
fired
dog.
one of them. Like he had to fire one of them. Like he fired the black one. He fired the black one, of course.
The dog stayed.
It's like eating, mining, black.
You got to
You
go.
gotta go, brother.
One of these things is not like the other.
Exactly.
But I stand for your people, and I know it's because I'm gay that you don't support me.
Oh my goodness. So my main point and frustration with his candidacy is he is your average run-of-the-mill white man who, yes, he's a gay man running for the presidency,
Which is a big deal.
which is a big deal,
historic.
and I will not take away from that. However, I think it's also important to note that he's also a masculine presenting man. Everything else about him, if it were not for his orientation, he would just
Would just
be
make him
Classic.
another
Classic.
regular
Yeah,
white
cis
man.
white
And
man.
so the fact that he is outraising and pulling higher than senators and
Is highly a
governors,
problem.
I
Yeah.
think just exemplifies like how much the power of whiteness plays in who gets press coverage.
Yeah, just how far
who-
it can take you.
He is seen as a trusted, competent leader
Even though he's the mayor of the smallest town in New York.
when
in
he's
America.
governed 3 people.
Yeah.
And so, again, and I know, De Blasio has since, at the time of recording of this podcast, has since, dropped his candidacy
He might
for
come back.
presidency. He might come back. You don't know.
My bet still stands, mister.
But I think it's so interesting is that you do have 2 white cisgendered males who are mayors of cities.
Yeah.
But yet, regardless of how you feel about De Blasio, he
New York.
didn't get any traction.
And it's New York.
And it's New York, and we're
It's the size of
talking
a
about
country. It's the size of a country.
Yes.
It is the size of a country. And again, it just blows my mind again, how press perpetuates the biases of society by uplifting a mediocre white man who is, yes, gay. And that's huge in terms of representation within the presidential campaign cycle.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But his record, which is troubling. So let's unpack that if we have time. But
Even more so just
yeah.
like some of the stances that he's taking now, right? Like I think that he is clearly making the calculation that like, you know what, Biden may not be in this thing for the long haul.
Yeah.
And so I need people, if and when that falls through,
I need to be that
people who are
choice.
like, you know what,
Right.
I don't necessarily want to go so liberal with a Sanders or a Warren, but how about this nice little gay boy right,
Right.
here?
Yeah.
He's he's being reasonable.
'Cause he's made a
And
sharp pivot.
in the center. And
He's made a sharp pivot to the
So I think
center.
that's
He
the
wasn't in the
calculation that
center when it
he's
started, Kyle. Like he
making.
started. He was.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a move.
He was Medicare for all.
He was Medicare for
and
all.
now he's
A
he was
couple years
Medicare
ago
for all.
as well.
Who
Yeah.
wanted?
They can afford it. Who
Yeah,
wanted?
who wanted?
Right.
Now he's Medicare
Sometimes
for some.
Right.
Now it's
T-shirts
just Medicare.
and-
Medicare can keep paying your fucking get a job. How about get a job? Just have your employer pay your fucking your medical bills.
How about marry rich? How about
How about that? How about go to Harvard?
How about speak 8 languages?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Then he
It's
gets some
like-
healthcare.
But no, you're absolutely right. I think when we think about this, I've made this joke before on Twitter. I'm like, I feel like he hears the theme song, The West Wing, when he talks. He's like a Hollywood version, scripted version of what a president would be, and I think he believes that. That's why when you see him at debates and he's like, I don't, I'm not going to argue, and
We shouldn't be.
we shouldn't be arguing. He it's like this whole identity of the
Right.
the like
holier than
Holier
thou.
than thou.
holier than thou. I'm better
the
than
moral
this.
authority.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
President
It worked for Obama.
Jed
a bit,
Bart,
but
Jed
like,
Bart.
yeah.
No, but even Obama had no problem wading into a little drama at a debate. In fact, he got in trouble at debates for being a little too aggressive, as they would say. But he's over here like, I don't think we should be like, because he thinks he's Jed Bartlett. And he thinks he's above it all, and
Right.
somehow
He likes to try to have like the final statement too, right? Like,
Yeah.
2 other people are kind of going at it. He's like, let me get in here.
Let me-
He's seen us cleaning this up.
Yeah, let me we just all need to work together. Great. What the fuck?
does it mean?
Like fantastic. No, tax the rich.
Right.
No, unfortunately what we shouldn't be doing is who taught you how to speak like this? You're the mayor of the smallest town in America. I have no idea. That's a fact.
He governs 3 people.
He governs 3 people. Of those 3 people, he fired one.
It's like the 4th largest in Indiana or some shit.
And then, like, the black folk in his town are struggling. Like, that should be easy. It's like only 5 black people in your town.
take care of them.
Just
take care.
Take them out for pizza every night. Like,
Lord knows,
him
I keep getting emails from him about eating pizza. What the fuck?
yeah, like, shoot, like,
I think that must be his black outreach, I guess.
yeah, like,
But speaking of which, so like he did obviously like South Carolina is the 4th contest.
it's the 4th.
It's
Nevada
the
got squeezed
first
in there.
one. Yeah, it's the first one that has a
Has black
sizable
people.
black population.
So it's like what? It's Iowa, New Hampshire
Iowa,
are
New
always
Hampshire.
historically first. New Hampshire being the first primary, Iowa being the first caucus, and then we go to Nevada. That's where you get a Latino vote, union
Right.
vote. That's the
Yep.
practice ground
Yep,
there.
yep, yep.
And then you get to
Then
the
you
big.
go to South Carolina,
Get to
which
South
is,
Carolina,
you know,
yeah.
old black women. And usually the more establishment candidate does well there, right? Hillary Clinton won it in the primary in 2016. You know, it's legendary for propelling Barack Obama, right? Like he was able to pull out and win the Iowa caucus.
He lost New Hampshire.
And he lost New Hampshire. But then obviously, you know, the black population in South Carolina was like, oh, this black man can win. And they started shifting their support. you
They
know?
weren't supporting him at first. They're supporting Hillary.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yep.
But what we're seeing now is Biden is leading in South Carolina, and in large part because of the black vote. So, like, Buttigieg did they did a focus group, right? Like, paid for this focus group to be done to figure out, all right, why am I not resonating in South Carolina? AKA, why these black folks don't love me?
Why don't these N-words? I'll be elegant about it.
No accusation that word was used. But yeah, and so like, you know, there was an article that had like several quotes from people saying, oh, well, we could be fine with it. Like he shouldn't flaunt it. Or, oh, I felt a way about, knowing that he has a husband that he's living with. And
He was told not to live with his husband. Maybe he shouldn't live with his
so
husband.
How does this work?
Yeah.
I mean, I will say it's a bit of a mixed bag, right? Like we talked a little earlier about like our Southern connections, right? Like from New York, but went to high school in Atlanta. I still have family there. And like I'm often
Went to law school in big old liberal Southern
California.
Southern California actually isn't that liberal at all.
Right, exactly.
Okay, never mind.
The more conservative part of California. But yeah, like people sometimes ask me, "Oh, would you ever move back to the South? Would you ever go back to Atlanta?" No, I would not. But I think like there's still a lot of backwards thinking, right? Like when I first heard about the story of Buttigieg, doing this polling or whatever in South Carolina, like I felt away, right? Like it was like my initial thinking is like, oh, you're just looking for an excuse. You're looking to be like, oh, black people don't support me.
So
because
if I
I'm
don't win,
gay.
if I don't win
If I
South Carolina, I can still be like, well, I was never going to win because I'm
bigoted black
Because-
folks.
yeah.
Right.
So I can still go to Super Tuesday and not have to be like
Right.
fighting.
I can
that
basically
fight.
write off,
Right.
South Carolina.
Right.
And all the southern states, frankly.
Yeah, really. But I mean, looking at it more, and I still have that feeling, right? Like I still do somewhat feel away. Obviously, campaigns have to do polling and they have to, do focus groups and see what's working and what's not. I also kind of feel like do that shit and keep it quiet. Like, why did it have to be leaked?
Why did it have to be
or,
leaked?
Right.
Anything
Right.
like that. Like, compile the data that you're compiling, and
just
use
be
it how you will,
noted.
note it and move accordingly. But like the public airing of it feels a little dirty to me, right? Like, I'm just letting y'all know,
Right.
black people feel a way
Right.
about me because of this.
Right.
And then that starts to get into conversations of like, intersectionality, right? And like being black and gay. And
Yeah.
now it's like, well, gotta choose the black side or the gay side or the, what have you. And pitting people against each other, different groups against each other. But there were also some things in there that like are problematic even in the black community, right? Like, we can be hypocritical at times. Like black Southern people love to be like, oh, well, I'm socially conservative. How? Why? Where?
What
Right.
has the history of this
Tons of-
country done to
like-
make us want to be
want
socially
to be socially
conservative?
conservative, right? Like socially conservative means that black people don't marry white people, that you stay over there and I stay over here, right? Like, so that type of thinking, I always try to challenge it, in our people and in people of color, in black people specifically, especially in the South, because it's just that type of thinking is the shit that got us where we are right now.
Right.
So
If
we do
Obama
need
was
to be
gay, if
more
Obama
open.
was himself, massively
Everything
presenting
about
everything
Obama,
but
right.
gay, with like a black husband, right? Like everything. Will you think he would have still won the South Carolina primary? Do you think black people would rather vote for a black person across the board as opposed to like, because the argument here is that black people just don't vote for gay people. But in my experience, black people just don't like talking. Like black people are very. We get very secretive.
We care about
what people think about
optics,
us,
the presentation of
and that's what I was
things.
gonna say. We care about what people think about us, and a part of that is that's why we're such cultural movers, and why we move culture so much because we're very good at being like presenting a show for you. And we care what people think.
practice that.
Right.
And so because of that, I firmly believe that if Pete Buttigieg won Iowa, somehow won New Hampshire, he was coming into South Carolina with all the power. They'd whip the votes for him. Black people like to be on where the winner is going to be. We like to know. We like to be on the winning side.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter if he was gay or not. If he's the one who's the star, we like to be where the star is located.
I think with him, his campaign leaking out, he's anticipating a potential loss, and so he's getting his excuse in place,
Yeah.
just to save face, which is really problematic because again, it feeds into that narrative that black folks are homophobic, and it's not either or, which would only come from a white cisgendered male campaign. So I'm going to go ahead and say that is not. There's not a recognition that it's not either or. Like there are lived experiences that intersect this shit every single day. And the other thing I will say when it comes to being socially conservative, and Georgia's home. I'm here in New York, but Georgia's home. The role of the church is incredibly powerful for our communities, right? And so I think it's really interesting when we're having these conversations, particularly when we're talking about democratic or progressive issues, which could potentially tie into how we show up for gay candidates. But I remember when Prop 8 failed in California.
And they blame black women.
Exactly. Yeah. As if black women have not saved your asses throughout history by voting for policies, but then everything that black women have done and continue to do, it's not good enough. And you don't recognize an entire history and track record.
Yeah.
This is the base. Understand and recognize
We're also going to
that this is
ignore
the
the
base.
fact that the Mormon church had invested in it, that there were billionaires, there were Silicon Valley billionaires who were investing in the vote no on prop.
But demonizing black folks is the way of America. And so he fell right into that narrative. Even though he's a gay man, he's still perpetuating that narrative that black women, black folks are somehow to blame for a white man not being successful in some faraway universe.
Right. You got all the privilege in the world.
Hello.
Don't look for a scapegoat.
Don't come and look for look. If you're losing, you're losing. We like to be with winners, so we're not going to support. We're not going to support. We'll vote for a winner. If you come into South Carolina, if Pete Buttigieg came into South Carolina as the presumptive nominee at that point, he gets South Carolina.
He was catching fire.
He gets South Carolina.
I think it's hard for me to see. It's hard for me to guess as to how that would play out. But I mean, I could see that, right? I could see. I think that's a very strong point. Yes.
Yeah,
black people do want to be with the winner, right? If the fact
South Carolina always goes with the winner.
No, hold on a second.
And they went with Obama.
Looks like Obama can win here.
Even the Republicans,
he's one of us.
They went for Trump.
Cool.
They know South Carolina voters be feeling it out. They be feeling it out. But even the black voters, they know what a winner is. They know where they want to be. They want to be with the winning team.
Yeah.
And so I think the argument here is that I think they feel what you feel. I think it's manifesting itself. Even if if we take, I'm gonna just take this as true. The study group, the focus group I'm gonna take it that there were people in the focus group who said, I don't feel this way. There's a vibe that I think what happens with the thing about Pete Buttigieg and the thing about this whole thing is that you're right. He presents white privilege in a lot of ways. He makes you feel like simply because he is a young white man who went to Harvard, who's a combat veteran and who speaks multiple languages, who's articulate, that because of that, he should be president, right? There's this theory that that's who the president should look like, right? Okay, so you take that into a segment, but he's gay, right? And for him, he recently came out in the larger scheme of his life,
right?
And so for him, that's still his primary identity. He's used it well to be able to move up the ladder because, like you said, he governed 3 people. So the reason why he gets to be this star is because he's somebody a little different. He's not just a white man. He's not just Beto O'Rourke. He's not just a regular white man.
Right.
But with that said, we kind of he overlaps the issues here. And I think voters look at it that way. When we talk about black voters in South Carolina, I think they look at it that way. We see a guy who instinctually, it feels as though he assumes we should vote for him simply because he's
of his pedigree.
He's his pedigree and he's centrist.
White entitlement.
Yeah. And then if we don't vote for him, then and so when we're trying to figure out why we don't like him, it's hard to put your finger on it. Even myself, I say something, I'm like, I don't like him. And sometimes it's hard to put my finger on it. I know it's what you described. I know it's a little bit, I know it's about white privilege, but there's also something else. And I feel as though something I just can't trust him. And so with different people, it's going to manifest itself in different ways, how you present it. I think in this focus group, we take it as true. It's quite possible people are just pinpointing the next worst thing, right? Like it's ranked choice voting negative, right? It's sort of like, all right, I don't feel right about him, so let me find out why that is. And it's easier to say, all right, well, I think it's his lifestyle. And it's like, shut up. One, it's not a lifestyle. Like, you're born that way. But I think it's his, like, that's what it is. And it actually may not be it is. It's just an instinctual thing that says, I don't like him, I don't want to vote for him. And people focus grouping you makes you feel as though you have to come up with a reason why you're not voting for him.
Right.
And
it also, like, it depends on how the questions were phrased and all of that, right? Like, if they're attempting to get a certain answer from this focus group, you know, then how you phrase questions and bring things out of people when they're looking for an excuse, like you said, or looking for the reason, searching for it. If you kind of feed them one, they might grab onto that. So, who knows?
There's no doubt sexuality matters. It's no doubt that in the Black community it is a thing. And like you said, you talked about this, like, you know, going to Atlanta. Atlanta, incidentally, has one of the biggest gay communities in the world. And yet still, you're right, you still have to deal, you know, you still have to contend with, there's a Southern church sort of, we don't talk about this, you know, so-and-so does what he does kind of vibe. But I don't think when it comes to deciding who the president should be, I don't feel like the voters are taking that into account. And I think, like you said, leaking it is just looking for an excuse.
Yeah. So in keeping with I feel like we got a theme of, like, problematic politicians this episode, but a little update on our girl Tulsi G, Tulsi Gabbard. So there was a report out. Well, obviously we know everything that happened with the whole Hillary thing, right? So Hillary essentially, she was on a podcast. She said that, you know, Tulsi is being groomed.
Well, she did not name Tulsi.
She did not, right. So she did not name.
There is a candidate.
She did identify that person's gender as being female, which very much limits it. We all know that it was Tulsi, and that's perfectly
It could have been Amy Klobuchar. but Hillary didn't want that smoke.
She didn't want that smoke. She didn't want that smoke.
If you think the smoke was bad from Tulsi, the smoke would have been Queen of Warmongers. Fuck that. Hillary would have seen like a comb. Just like bing, flying at her head. Which one would have? Amy would have pulled up on her outside her house.
You want some of this?
Yeah, snatched her from
the back in the woods.
I heard
you were talking that shit.
I heard I'm a good Midwestern woman, and I heard my name was in your mouth. And where I come from, we have these hands,
and I can be sent
these good Midwestern hands, hardworking, grain of the earth.
Salt the
hands. You can have them if you like them.
You can receive these hands.
Upside your head.
Queen of the rocks. But yeah, so, you know, we've had this whole, like, fight between Hillary and Tulsi and her weird response to it and all that, which, incidentally, the New York Times actually misrepresented part of what Hillary said, right? Like, they said that they claimed that Hillary said that this person, you know, was being groomed by the Russians to run in a third party, you know, candidacy for the president, blah, blah, blah. When actually what Hillary said was that this person is being groomed by Republicans, right? So it definitely, like, she's still making the case that, like,
somebody
don't fuck with this person.
With this person, right? You know what I'm saying? With this human.
To be Tulsi. But, like, you know,
she's like,
it's a difference.
Don't fuck with her.
Yeah.
Whoever that may be. Aloha.
Whoever that may be. From Hawaii. But it's a difference, right, to say that Hillary said the Russians versus the Republicans. At the end of the day, Tulsi ain't helping herself because she recently announced that she's not going to seek another term in Congress, right? So she's like, oh, I'm putting all my eggs in the basket for presidency. I'm running for the nomination. First of all, girl, you're not going to win. Like, you're polling at nothing. You just squeaked by and made this last debate. You didn't make the one before because of your polling and your money.
Did a focus group in South Carolina.
Right. And they said
With 3 people.
And they said all of them were like, "Who are you?"
I'm sorry.
They wouldn't vote for me because I am Hawaiian.
Yeah, because I'm a Hindu woman.
So that's why, right? I use the same firm Pete used.
Yeah.
We get a veterans discount. We
bad
get whatever taxpayers. We get the taxpayers
I
discount.
have a veterans program.
But yeah, no, yeah. Her not running for a 3rd term makes it. You're not getting nominations, so you're making the bet that you're going to be in this for the long haul.
Yeah.
So it actually kind of feeds into the idea that you do think that even if you lose the Democratic nomination,
That you're still gonna be out
you're
here.
still going to be in here because
Yeah.
you're going to quit your job.
Yeah, you're gonna give up your seat, which she was potentially at risk of losing. But like, yeah, it's not helping her now, right? Like the point is that she was trying to push back on Hillary and call her this, that, and the warmonger, and saying that the campaign is now between her.
It's
and
clear
Hillary.
now.
This campaign has always been between me and you. Like, okay. But like to say like, oh well, I'm not running for another term in Congress, and that like again, so what is going to happen to you now when you fail to get the nomination, which you will fail to do? There's another report that said that she was like, I guess in a meeting with some donors, like Wall Street donors or something,
Yeah.
and literally like paid some lip service to taking this to the convention and and all of that. So like she's definitely looking like she's gonna be some type of a spoiler. And I think that that's why I applaud Hillary for calling her out, because my hope is that somehow, like us talking about this now, spoils her spoiling.
Yeah.
Like, you can't,
Right.
don't try and pull that shit, because
Right.
we saw it months ago and called you out on it months
Right.
ago. So we don't want to see it.
'Cause I feel like your friend Tulsi did not really have a lot of
How you really feel about Miss Tulsi? You better tell us how you feel.
classy shade. No one knows, I shouldn't say no one knows who she is, but like she's not polling, so she's not a viable candidate, right? So she hasn't broken more than 2% in the polls, and her fundraising is subpar. And I think it's interesting because if you didn't know who Tulsi was or what she was about, she would conceptually make a great candidate if you did not know anything about her, right? And I think it's really interesting as I watch my Twitter feed and social media, the people who do not live and breathe policy and politics like us, who know how problematic she is. They have this idea that she is this, woman of color, she's a veteran, and she's yada, yada, yada. She checks off a lot of boxes that
You're creating a candidate,
right, that you would love to check off. But when you look at her policies, it's just like, well, let's just throw her whole candidacy into the trash can.
Yeah, it's not even Republican. It's just
what is this?
What is it? And so it's interesting because I feel like after Hillary brought her into this conversation, was like, look,
snatched her by the back of her wig.
snatched all the edges.
Yeah, just like
all of them.
All of them.
And I was here for it. It's interesting because people who thought that she was like a good candidate before, I'm putting good in air quotes for the audience.
Quote unquote.
Quote unquote. That now people are beginning to learn about who she is. Whereas before, maybe she could have been a viable third party candidate because woman of color, veteran, proudly serves our country.
Don't know much about her. Then,
right.
whatever they
right.
want.
She's the younger, better Jill Stein. And so that could be potentially really problematic, especially if we have like a redo of what was Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, because people don't know better, right?
Yeah.
But like now that Hillary put her name in her mouth, if she didn't put her name in her mouth. Shout out to the New York Times who did, but
literally
not
using her name,
but you know.
I don't know who you're talking about.
How did the New York Times fuck up like that?
Right, it's a recording.
It's
a
It's
podcast.
also the New York Times.
Right.
Like I feel
Did y'all
as
listen to
though
the
I do. I feel as though Hillary was like after it came out. She's like, I don't know if I said exact because we're in a podcast right now. Sometimes I don't even remember what I said in this podcast. So it's like something like did I say that? All right,
I talked about it.
I talked about it. No, I don't think I said it just like that. But it's the New York Times. They wouldn't put out some stupid shit. Maybe I did say it. Like she might have just assumed.
But they did.
That's why Hillary didn't immediately. Because you would think Hillary would be
because
like,
I was like, well, why didn't Hillary herself come out
say,
and correct the
I didn't
record
say
and be like,
that.
I didn't say.
But I think even she was like, it's the New York Times. They're not going to misquote Hillary Clinton.
New York Times, I hold my beer.
Yeah, like they're like, no, we're going to misquote you.
I'll show you.
Look, we're under the same time constraints as every other publication. We're rushing out stories. We got to get context.
Listen to the show.
We get content. It's like us. It's like shit. We could be in the New York Times, a New York Times podcast at this point. But yeah, so what are your feelings on Tulsi? I just want to hear it.
Yeah, I think especially like not to confine your statements, but also like as a veteran, right? I think a lot of times
Because she uses
nonstop.
it.
She
She leans
hangs her
on it
hat
all the time.
and it's like. You know, I
Right.
think initially, like, the responses on Twitter and social media was like, "Oh, how dare you? She's a veteran." Blah. Like, oh, okay,
That don't
I
mean
get
shit.
that, right? And respect for her service,
Right,
absolutely.
yeah, yep.
But that doesn't mean she can't be
Problematic.
used
Right, absolutely.
by the Russians.
Right.
The Russians are currently using our quote unquote
Current
commander
president,
in chief.
the commander in chief. He's a he's
Right.
not a veteran,
And
but he's
he
the
runs,
commander in
he's the
chief. He
commander
runs
in
the
chief,
other. He runs
right?
everybody else.
So let's
Right.
not act like just because of this, right, or just because of that. And I think that's the
Especially
society
because
we live in
she-
today. Anybody
Right.
can be fucked up.
Right.
Especially because
Right.
honestly, she
Right.
hates the war machine, right? Like she says, it's not like she's a veteran who's actively says, "I hate
Who's actively
the military and I
right,
hate what they
exactly.
made us do," or what the leaders in the House and Congress and
Yeah,
so on.
and there are some very reasonable points to make of
absolutely.
that. She's not
Right.
quite making them.
Right. Right.
But sorry, go ahead.
As a veteran, particularly as a fellow combat veteran, she was in Afghanistan, I was in Iraq. I think I correlate my association with her as kind of like, for us, you know, all our skin folk, you know, ain't your kinfolk type
Right,
thing.
right.
And just because she's a fellow combat veteran and also a woman of color does not mean that she's for me. As someone with brown skin, as someone who has served overseas, and also when you look at her support for the policies for veterans and transgenders, I mean, like transgendered veterans, like she was not supportive of. She has an incredibly homophobic past, and she
Right.
has seen the light.
So she says.
I'm using
More quotes.
the air
She has
quotes
seen
again. She has seen the light.
the light
the votes.
of the election.
But she's seeing the light for votes, right? And so I think for me, again, you know, I would love to see more women of color who are also fellow combat veterans step up and continue to serve our country through elected office, just not her.
Now is time for one of our favorite things on the.
This is our hit game.
Yes, on the podcast.
Obviously,
It
that's
is
why we
time
had to have it ready for
bring
you.
Ooh, I
They
mean,
had
I
ready
can hit
for-
ups here.
Bringing it back. We didn't do it in the first episode of season 2, but we have brought Elect, Indict, Chill back. So for any new listeners or people who might have forgotten,
We have many. We're actually we're going through
yeah.
the roof. Ratings through the fucking
Spiking.
roof. Spiking.
But Elect and Die Chill is basically fuck, marry, kill. We give a theme every particular time that we play, and then each person pulls 3 names from the little basket and has to decide who of these people are you going to elect for whatever reason, who are you going to indict for whatever reason, who are you going to chill with for whatever reason. All right, so Nyla knows how to play. We all know how to play.
Yeah, but I'll start first, so
Go
I can,
first.
we can do the first thing. So I'll pick 3 names out, and I'll close my eyes. Let me shake it in front. Oh, oop.
That's cheating, Malik.
that's cheating.
You-
These little
Get one out of the
slits,
basket.
little slits in the basket. Y'all hear it shaking? ASMR. Okay. 1, 2.
I mean, they're folded. You can look. You got 3.
Yep, I got 3. All right,
So, yeah, do yours now.
I'll do mine. All right, the first name I have is former state senator Jeff Klein,
Okay.
head of the Independent Democratic Conference, otherwise known as the IDC.
The demolished.
Demolished, the dead to the world. Former President Bill Clinton.
Oh, okay.
Damn.
You got something to say. You can say it.
Proceed.
And former
liking
former Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver.
Oh, you got some good ones over there.
I know.
Good one.
That's called grabbing. I got the top notch prop. So this. We didn't say this. Our basket is full of problematic politicians. Oh, you did
Yes.
say it a little earlier.
Yeah.
In the thing, but problematic politicians in the basket. And so Jeff Klein, Bill Clinton, and Sheldon Silver.
Mm-hmm.
Who will I elect? Who would I indict? And who would I chill with? Okay, this is this is a tough one. This is a tough one. Who do I elect? Okay, so this is gonna sound fucked up. Let me make something clear. And I've had this argument for years. I've had an argument with my mother. I've had this argument with several people. I'm going to elect Bill Clinton because he was a president for most of my life, for most of my early childhood. I remember having to watch his inauguration in like kindergarten. Actually, I wasn't born yet. I apologize. I got a little anachronistic there. I was not born yet. 90s baby.
Young whippersnapper.
But I remember watching his inauguration, and so you always remember your first. So
YouTube.
on YouTube, yeah, I watched the inauguration on YouTube. I was the number the hit song when I was born was "Blame It on the Alcohol" by James Fox. Bill Clinton, and so this is all to say they're all problematic. I elect Bill Clinton because he was the president. He was a triangulator. He voted. He signed welfare reform. He signed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He signed it. He signed it. He signed. He signed all Adoma. He signed so many things. He was a quintessential centrist Democrat that everybody that was that image of like that Pete Buttigieg is trying to live up to. All started this whole like. Even that's what the West Wing was based off of. It came out after his term. This idea that the president should be moderate and I should appoint both a Republican and a Democrat to the Supreme Court because you know what? That's fairness. I'm above it all and I'm fair and I believe in equal debate. So I have my issues with Bill Clinton as I've gotten older. For sure, the crime bill, Joe Biden. I have my issues with Bill Clinton. I also think, and let me make something clear, I also think that the way Monica Lewinsky was treated was fucking. I'm getting there. Kyle just played me off.
I mean, you're going in on one.
No, I'm about to get in there. No, because I have to say this. The way Monica Lewinsky was treated was completely wrong. Put yourself in her shoes. A 21-year-old, actually, I think she was younger, maybe 19 when she first started. Intern in the most powerful human fucking being on the planet says, "Suck my dick." Regardless, you're gonna like even if it's not fair. Like it was like, and for her to take the brunt of all of this and not be able to have a career, her name is associated with sex scandal.
Right.
Shit, there was a Beyonce song that like talked about Monica Lewinsky all on my gown, which I assume means
Yes, we get it.
You know, it's like she took the brunt of all of that as a fucking young intern who just was trying to figure out life. And I'm like, it's just not fair, and it wasn't wrong. And I'm happy she's having a renaissance now. People being like, wait a second, we treated her really badly when the man who was the president was the one to blame. But I'll elect him.
Despite all that,
I'll elect him. I am going to indict Jeff Klein.
Okay.
Because he is the head of the IDC. He put his tongue down a person's throat. With his cigarette nasty tongue, I imagine he had just smoked a fucking cigarette or a cigar and was like, ah. And I feel as though he like he's a and also the fact that he was so craven and thought, oh, we're gonna do what we have to do to align ourselves with Republicans in order to basically hold back some major progressive legislation. Right. So, sorry, Jeff. You're being indicted. You're not indicted. You should be. You'll be indicted under here. And then chill. I'm going to say Sheldon Silver because he's elderly. And at this point, I don't know, I imagine he probably knows a great place to get a coffee and a bagel and we could just go chill at the Lower East Side. I don't know. But I guess I'll chill with Sheldon Silver. He has years and years as speaker. He probably has so much knowledge and information. And at this point, his crime was not sexual. It wasn't.
Right.
It was, he was cutting into the kitty. He was stealing a little bit. He was double dealing. And actually, the Supreme Court went back on some of that stuff because they were uncertain as to what is corrupt, what's favor, what's not favor, what's So I'll chill with Sheldon Silver. So elect Bill Clinton, indict Jeff Klein.
All these folks are problematic.
Chill with Sheldon Silver.
So
I'm sorry. This was a hard one. I had a hard set, guys.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Nella.
My turn. All right. So I'm going to shake it like a salt shaker. The basket of names, that is, for our listeners. And then I have to pick 3, right?
Yes.
Lady Luck be with me.
1, got to 2.
I don't like that one. it had bad energy.
Energy? They all do.
Touche. Touche.
All right, so who we got?
Okay, so I have Councilmember Grudnick. How do you say his name?
Barry
Grudnick, yeah, the man who sexually harasses his staffers. And then I have a former Councilmember Hiram
Montserrat.
who's also very problematic. Can't I just throw them all in jail?
I might have to. Lastly.
Oh, and then I have your former Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman. Damn. Okay.
I work for a lot of. Oh my god!
I'm sensing a theme. Andy King, Schneiderman.
Oh my god! I'm just like starting doing my own math. I'm like,
I'm sensing a theme.
am I the thread here? Am I the problem?
I feel like there's an established pattern, Malik. And that pattern is
well,
you.
The pattern is I be out when shit hits the fan.
That's true.
So the pattern
When
is
Malik leaves,
that's when shit's going to go down.
right after.
So we'll see what happens in that second office.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I wish this were a card game where I could just fold my cards because
Just like,
this is just like I fold my cards because all of these are just terrible human beings. And quite frankly, I don't want to elect any of them or chill with any of them. So I'm going to exercise executive privilege.
Oh no! We're what?
As the guest on the podcast.
creative, elect them to.
Okay, so I am going to. Okay.
You got to make tough decisions.
I'm going to indict Schneiderman. Well, they're all terrible people, but Schneiderman took shit to like a whole nother level.
Yeah.
But so did this guy because didn't he break glass against his girlfriend's face and like
Sure.
drag
Yes,
her?
Yeah.
So they're all
Yeah,
problematic.
you got a tough set too.
You got a tough set.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to differentiate.
Yeah, they're all really bad.
Yeah, they're all really bad. Okay, so I'm going to indict Schneiderman.
Okay.
What you looking at over there?
I'm looking at my options, like elect, indict, chill. I'm like, can I like chill with them, then indict them just for like justice?
You can chill with them in prison.
Oh my
Elect
god,
them
this is
to
terrible.
prison.
Oh, I feel like I just pulled a really crappy hand. All these are terrible people, but Schneiderman indict him. Councilmember Gronchik, the one who sexually harasses his staffers. I just all of these are terrible people for women, and I think
Yes,
as the
I
only
feel
one
you.
on this podcast, I cannot, in good conscience, elect or chill with any of them.
Okay.
So I am going to
Indict all three.
indict all three. Fold my cards. Just because in good conscience, I cannot.
We'll allow this one time.
Don't the rest of y'all guess him on here.
I
please.
worked
Don't
really
let-
hard to like figure it out.
No other guests better come on here. Nyla gets special treatment, and that's it.
It's my southern charm. I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, so last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and pick my three. All right. I got one. I like the way this paper looks right here. And I'm going to go with this one right here.
One little straggler there.
Yeah, it's chilling on the side. All right. So, former state Senate Minority Leader John Sampson.
Okay.
All right. He was a senator from Brooklyn. All right.
Who took his seat?
Who has the seat? Roxanne Prasad.
Oh.
Senator Prasad has it. Funny enough, I was actually in my interview to be the executive director when he was like we were on the TV with him like being
Moved out.
I think it was after the trial was over. Yeah, I think it was like after the trial. Yeah. All right. Former representative from Buffalo, Chris Collins.
Okay. It's recent.
Some recent news.
Financial stuff.
And last but not least, former state Senate Majority Leader Malcolm Smith.
Got a couple of
All right.
Senate majority leaders, minority leaders.
All right. All right. So elect, indict, chill. Damn. I very much. The interesting thing here, like these three are all like it's about
They're
like
all
yours were,
financial-
like
they're all financial,
like yours
white collar.
Nyla's was like issues with
Violence
sexual
against
harassment
women.
Yeah.
and violence against women. These are all like abuses of the public trust,
Yeah.
and, like, money and which I take that very seriously.
He says.
Until my shit comes out.
Which I take very seriously.
Very seriously. Unless, of course, y'all,
Unless I need a little bit of a fundraiser.
we kid. All right. Damn. I am going to. This is tough.
These are tough. Not as tough as the last round.
Definitely not. But some of the same issues, right? Like, how do you differentiate this person's financial crimes from this person's financial crimes? Like, I guess I'll go ahead and say that I will. Elect John Sampson. Again, all these people are problematic. All of them have done some terrible things. I don't even, in this pile, don't want to necessarily say they're terrible people, but they did bad things.
Yeah, they abused their power.
Right. John Sampson, Senator Sampson, I never had the opportunity to meet him, but I know all his colleagues like thought highly of him, and they were very disappointed in what happened. So perhaps he's redeemable. Obviously he's still serving out his time right now. But
the feds probably got in there too, got a little taste.
Yeah.
Everybody like to get a little taste.
At the time.
So it's like, so he gets his
crimes.
He gets state crimes, and then all of a sudden he gets like, when he gets out, we're gonna send you to Alabama for federal crime.
So I've heard good things about him just like personally. So again, maybe he could be a nice guy and turn his life around. All right, so I'll elect him to something. Chris Collins, indict. He got to go. The fact that he even like all the shit was known when he ran the last time and still won, that's and that's a seat that Democrats can hopefully maybe possibly win.
He actually was indicted, so.
Yeah, and
So that happened.
He was recently indicted.
Just echoing the sentiments of the justice system. All right, and then last but not least, former Senator Malcolm Smith. I guess I'll just chill with him.
Just because he had that gel, like he slicked his hair.
Yeah, he seemed like it'd be a fun time.
Whenever you see a black dude in politics who wears a bow tie and slicks their hair, they drink brown liquors,
right.
And you just know.
Just the type of liquor I prefer. Like we can sit and chill and drink some
That's gonna be Kyle in like 30 years, just like slick down African American hair, pinstripe suit, a bow tie. You just know brown liquor. Corruption's coming your way. All right. So that is the show. Let's do a quick little announcements. We have our store open on our website.
Our House Party merch shop is open and available for folks to start buying.
We're gonna send you something when when the store's open, a little gift.
My expertise does not come for free.
Absolutely not.
That's right.
You better pay me. Hashtag pay her. I appreciate you.
All right. And any other announcements? Naila, you got anything you want to tell? What you getting into?
Get into this week. I'm just trying to save the Republic. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm crisscrossing the country. Always happy to be back in New York and happy to spend my one day back in the city with you two. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Anything you want to say to our listeners about just anything?
Where can they
follow you?
I'm trying to up my Twitter game.
Okay.
But you can follow me if you want to. I'm at my first name, last name, NAILAHAMARU. I tweet about politics and policy, women in politics, corrupt politicians, commentary on all that's going on with the presidentials. Just, tweeting my thoughts and like to engage with my followers. So looking forward to connect with you on Twitter.
All right, so follow her at her. Slide in them DMs if you must.
To talk about business and politics.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you slide into my DMs about anything else, swipe left, block. Block.
Cute. All right, so that was the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for being here, Nella. Thank you for y'all listening. And Kyle, thank you. Wish you the best. Wish you the best in your future endeavors.